So now I'm just going to introduce our speakers for today, Richard and our Digital Solutions Central Manager, Steve. So Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Okay, so I am currently General Manager for Scotland for Chelsea. Myself. I also set strategy for the company. We're not based in Chelsea, not a factory. Okay, I'm not very good holding these things because I tend to wave my arms around. Right, okay, so prior to joining CAF, I was an analyst at Gartner for 5 years, covering mobile technologies, amongst other things, and I'm glad to be back building things.
Okay, so if I can work on my feet a bit, can you just tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about today?
Okay, so each year I've been putting together, for the last few years, a top 10 technology trends. Now, because this is only 20 minutes, you're going to get 7 of them, so sorry about that. The full thing takes over an hour to present, so this is going to be a very fast, focused look at what are the key technologies that you should be looking to implement this year. Not things that are 10 years down the road or whatever. This is stuff that is actionable now. So that's what I'm going to be presenting.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And finally, before we kick off, Steve, can you tell us why is this of interest to the Oil and Gas Technology Centre?
Well, thank you, Nikki. So welcome, everyone. This is extremely useful for us because we, the Digital Transformation Solutions Centre, we want to look at how we transform the industry over the next, say, 5-10 years. And when we're looking at technologies that we believe are going to be in place, we need to know how they are going to be built up from technologies that we need to be working on right now. So digital trends on the things that are really important to be working on right now is a very important subject. And in addition to that is where they're converging. So in other words, if you have a convergence between a number of different trends, that's also a very important bit. So, Richard.
Thank you. So, remember to stand away from the screen. Right, how do we know what's going to be an important tech trend as opposed to something that's interesting but not useful? Well, if we look at it, 3 stages. So we have emerging technologies where we don't know whether they're going to be useful or not. Then those things will either tail away to nothing, excuse me, or, there we go, standing too close, or they hit this growth curve and then they become mainstream. So it's a little bit like, if you look at the hype cycle where it's going through those things. When I was at Gartner, I did indeed contribute to hype cycles. And they are kind of upside down. So this is still at the very beginning of the hype cycle. So this is like the opposite. So as things are heading over here towards mainstream, this is really measured by market size. So when does something become strategic? It becomes strategic about the middle of this curve here because at least people are actually deploying it. So everything that's here is stuff that's being deployed. Oops. This is more difficult than it looks. So I said there were 7 topics. Here we go. Mobile and apps, social everywhere, mixed reality, AI and machine learning stuff, data-driven industry, personalization, 5G, and faster connectivity. And I will try and key this back into oil and gas, but I'm a generalist. I don't just do oil and gas. So, okay. What is mobile? How many of you have smartwatches on? Okay, how many of you actually have VR headsets out of interest? Yep, there we go. I'm liking this. What does it mean to be mobile? How many of you got Amazon Echoes, Alexa devices? How many of you got Google Homes as well? Okay, so when you talk about mobile and an app, what does it mean now? It's a moving target. So I get stuff in my watch here. It's very useful that you can see when things are happening. You get messages coming in. You can do a little bit of triage. It can remind you of stuff. It can prompt you to get up and walk around or whatever. That's really important. Now, what happens if you are working in a job where you have to wear safety equipment like gloves? Using a phone's a royal pain. it's probably buried underneath layers of high-vis clothing and thermal protection. And you got to take it out, unlock it, and go da-da-da-da-da. How much easier is that if it comes in through a headset or on your wrist? Transformative for people working. Okay, it's back again. So, why do we talk about this? It's because you have to stand back and think away from mobile. You have to stand back and think, what's an app? Because these things are fundamentally changing. And they're changing to focus on the people who use it and focusing particularly on employees. So bear in mind, this is a general presentation, not oil and gas. A lot of the time, people are looking at customer experience, but the best way to get good customer experience is actually to make your staff using the user experience so much better that they pass on the delight of what they're using to their customers. Voice is coming. So this will become a real-life experience. You already can order pizza through your voice-enabled device. You can get smart scales that connect to each other. These devices will be talking to each other and come to the conclusion that, no, you really should not be ordering that pizza. You should be getting something more healthy. Okay? I heard a presentation by a lady a couple of weeks back called Sharmadine Reid, MBE, who created a whole series of hip-hop nail gel brands. Looking at the audience here, I don't see an awful lot of people who are going to be in that market. Anyway, Sharmadine's an amazing lady. She has a skill that was written for her at Alexa that when she gets home at night, she can say, Alexa, how much money did we make in the salon today? So she has her accounting system hooked up to her Amazon Echo. It's pretty amazing. So this stuff is happening. Again, hazardous environment. You're working in complicated space. It's much easier to have things talk to you. And there's a lot of warehousing solutions out there that already do this. So there's warehousing. Go pick this up off shelf 15. You know the IKEA experience. It's like that, big scale. And it just talks to you. And you pick up the thing, you look at it through your glasses, and it goes, oh, barcode, boom, scans it. Very fast. Okay, apps are changing. Moving on. Social. Social is going to be absolutely everywhere. We're going to have dedicated, specific, purposeful communities, either a subset to big networks or independent ones. This is a thing called Gymder, which is Tinder for gym buddies. So if you're looking for a gym buddy, you can swipe left, swipe right. I think I'm going to definitely swipe whichever the way to get rid of him is. He's definitely too muscly for me. So these things are going to become really important, not just for social activities, but work, because work is socially enabled. This big splodge in the background is my work graph of LinkedIn. Part of it, anyway. This is 500 or so of my connections in LinkedIn and how they relate to each other. So you can see they're pretty densely connected. Think how much information you can derive from that. HR might think that you have a nice clean hierarchy where people report to others. But we all know that's not how business works. Business works by who you talk to. Who do you go to find out things? This is how you find out who those people are. So you can see hubs of activity here. So there's another cluster here. Think what you can do by using this graph to enhance your work experience. I need to fix this problem. Who is most likely to know how to fix this problem? And I can go automatically to... I know it's for the recording. Workplace for Facebook. Anybody come across this? This is basically Facebook for use at work. They discovered inside Facebook that the staff were using their own product, dog fooding, as they say in the tech industry, to communicate. So instead of using something like Slack or Link, they were using Facebook itself. And it's in use in such unlikely places. Over here, this is Ripple, which is from the same people that brought Tinder, the dating app, to the world. This is for making work connections in the same sort of LinkedIn style. And yeah, swipe right. Maybe we could take the other microphone now. To see, if I swap it. It's just that this, no, it keeps cutting in and out. Yeah. So
let's see what we can do.
This one. There we go, green. Okay. This is one of the typical problems that you have when you get older. You can't see stuff on screens, which is why big buttons And audio systems are actually very, very good. Anyway, so this is Ripple, as I said. This is something that allows you to select who you want to interact with. And the idea behind it is a bit different from LinkedIn. It allows you to say, I need to go and find somebody, I don't know, who's like a well data expert or someone who's a storage farm operator, and I can search for them and then flip through them left and right and pick the people that I want. So very much happening. Now I'm going to pick up on mixed reality again here. So for those of you who saw the previous presentation, this is picking up some of it. It is very heavily used today already in warehousing. If you go and look at any of the major warehouses operated by the tech companies and engineering companies like Bosch, for example, they use these typically Vuzix headsets, and the Vuzix headset combines the ability to scan barcodes and talk to you. So this is the thing that says, go to aisle 15, go to shelf column 6, shelf A, take 3 of these things and put them in box B, and it's talking to you all the time. It's just talking to you in your ear. Lots of other interesting things. This is a construction example, which is a ruggedized device that allows you to look at a space and say, oh, I'm going to be putting a staircase there. Lets you visualize what it looks like before you start building it. Helps you understand the space. This is a HoloLens being used in production for car doors. They use HoloLens at Boeing for the construction of wiring harnesses for aircraft. And very detailed work. They build this very traditional, actually. It's all handmade wiring harnesses, putting them together. Lots and lots of applications that are in place today. So it's not just training. There's all sorts of retail things. Frankly, nobody actually uses any of this stuff. Lots of shops thought it'd be really cool to have an application that'll tell you how to find the ice cream in the supermarket. Turns out most people know how to do that. You don't actually have to build an app for them. There's lots of interesting areas in there. But I think the most important thing is that smart PPE is coming along for oil and gas. I'm afraid I don't know the make of this helmet, but it is something that's coming up. This combines augmented reality technology like the HoloLens into a safety helmet. So you can start using it. Okay, it doesn't have PPE on the rest of them. But once you start doing this, it lets you do all sorts of amazing things. So not only is he getting a view of the world, but the network where he's working on this construction site knows where he is. So if there's construction vehicles coming up, the headset can say there's a forklift behind you. And similarly for the forklift driver, they can hear there's somebody in front of you, you better stop, or you can just stop automatically. You can start monitoring body temperature. If it's a hot environment, you can see when people are starting to go hypothermic, and you can also start to see when people have got other health issues when they're working construction sites, dehydration, hypothermia rather than hyperthermia, all the rest of it. So, connected construction sites are already happening. There's an unbelievable amount of activity in the sort of big quarrying space, which I know is kind of parallel to oil and gas. And what's classic, of course, is they don't have any network connectivity. So one of the first things you have to do is pull Wi-Fi onto your construction site because it's in the middle of nowhere, or it's underground, or out in the middle of the ocean. Connectivity becomes a big issue. But the equipment is coming to help with that as well. So AI and machine learning. AI, there are lots and lots of toolkits out there that let you build AI devices. I'm really having a bad time with these microphones. The interesting thing about AI is that we have more tools to build it than any other technology ever in the history of software. But people don't know what to build with it. I call this, because I'm an analyst, the cognitive concept gap. Okay? So you have to work out what it is you want to build with it. So you can think about AI in terms of big pile of Lego bricks. And most people, when they're presented with a big pile of Lego bricks, don't know where to start, which is why Lego moved on to these kits. It doesn't matter whether you're buying a Millennium Falcon. Anybody got the Millennium Falcon kit here? Amazing. Normally somebody says yes. The Death Star? Taj Mahal? No, anyway, right. All of those are real. You can get them if you've got enough money to buy them. So what does AI do? AI is the way to replicate certain processes, and the way to think about it is it's augmenting what you do already. But just like bringing in an intern or having somebody joining your team, you need to teach it. AIs need to learn. A lot of people think, oh, I'll just go and buy me an AI, I'm going to install it. And of course it doesn't work because you have to actually spend a lot of time training building things. Now, the interesting thing here is that a lot of the time, you're probably already using AI without seeing it. How many Gmail users here? Smart Reply? How many of you use Smart Reply? Everybody who uses it? For the people who don't use Gmail, Smart Reply is a thing that it gives you 3 possible replies automatically at the bottom of any inbound email saying, yes, that's great, no thank you, or I'll think about it, for example. And it scanned your email and thought what the most likely thing that you personally, because it looks at the way you write, would reply to this message. And you can just tap the quick reply, off it goes. 13% of all replies are done with quick reply. One of the big consultancies saved over 12,000 billable hours by automating reply. So there's lots of cool things that you can do. Now, in the oil and gas area, people tend to think about optimizing stuff down in the middle. We've got all this super data. Let's do some smart stuff. Let's go back to the picture I actually wanted to look at. You've got all this smart stuff down here. Let's go and figure out where all the rest of the oil is, or whatever you want to do. That is the core process, but you can start much lighter by looking at things like customer enhancement, workforce productivity tools. You all work with HR systems like booking your holidays and stuff like that. Yeah? They're all a pain to use, yeah? They're all horrible. Can you imagine how much easier it would be if you had a chatbot that allowed you to do something like, I'd like to book a holiday from the 20th of March until the 1st of April. Bang. And that's all you had to do. You didn't have to log in. You didn't have to figure out where to find it. Huge productivity benefits from simple things like that. And the key reason that this stuff works is instead of you learning how to use the software learns how to work for you. That's where the learning comes in. It is adapting the way that it delivers experiences to the way that you want to work. And you think just about how you can bring that out in every activity that you do. What's repetitive? What's brainlessly repetitive? Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta that you do in your job. Everybody has bits like that. That is open for AI, and it frees you up to do the interesting things. But to be able to do this, you have to be able to get to the data. A lot of the data is all locked up. It may not be locked up for privacy reasons, or it may not be locked up for security. It may be simply locked up because it's all in Excel spreadsheets. The world runs in Excel. You look at the big finance houses, they have hundreds of thousands of Excel spreadsheets sitting on people's desktop computers, which you can't get to. Now, what you need to do in order to drive the next generation of industry systems is unlock all of this data and create access, API, application programming interface. Very simple, basically allows you to connect things up. It's like sockets to plug into. So if you want to do chatbots or tablets or whatever it happens to be, mobile access. You need the API layer to get into this stuff. So in parallel with the AI activities, it's really important to start unlocking the data, making it accessible. Now, once you start gathering that data, you can start doing digital twins. Now, this is very relevant to oil and gas. Digital twins are models of your equipment that are not coded up by humans. It's coded by the data, if you like. So it's something that looks at the actual behavior of the equipment so that you can predict what it's going to do. So this is a manufacturing line of some kind. This is a Siemens picture. And they can use this to say, well, what happens if we speed up the production or if we slow it down? What happens if the temperature goes up? What happens if one of these parts starts to vibrate too much? And it's not based on what we think. It's not based on what we modeled using algorithms or people sat down, did the physics modeling of it. The mechanical engineers said if this vibrates. It's not done like that. It's actually based on real life by looking at the data coming in from it. Now this is a city-size simulation. This is done in Unity 3D. It's a fully dynamic view of a city, a real city. I'm afraid I don't know which one. But it's sitting on top of a thing called the Improbable engine, which is a gaming engine that lets you represent the real world, not visually, but in terms of its behavior. So you build the Unity visual model on top of the Improbable engine. And this thing allows you to do stuff like, okay, so here's a bridge between two buildings over here. What happens if that bridge collapses and blocks the traffic? What happens if it collapses on top of people? How do the emergency services get there? How long will it take? Or what happens if the cell tower that's just up there if that stops working? What impact does that have? And the improbable engine, coupled with this, allows you to visualize physically what would happen to the city in the event of these catastrophic failures. On a slightly different note, we can use the same kind of technology to sell more. This is Cosabella, which is an Italian underwear manufacturer. They got rid of their human advertising agency and media buyers and replaced them with an AI called Albert. And their sales went up 30%, and their return on advertising spend, i.e. the amount of money you get back for each pound you spend on advertising, went up 3,000%. Because they were using algorithms to pick where they placed the adverts rather than using very experienced and generally competent media buyers. Dramatic change. Now, this is Gmail, for those who hadn't seen it. Spotting work patterns. Box, which is like Dropbox, but doesn't have drop it, it's just box.com. They have the ability to spot people's usage patterns for files. So if you always open this particular spreadsheet at 2 o'clock every day to update your sales prospect, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it pops that up to the top of your list of used files so you don't have to go look for it. It will also do lots of other things. And there's software out here which is called RPA, Robotic Process Automation, that watches what you're doing and builds software to automate the patterns. You can go and buy that today. 5G, lots of people talking about 5G. 5G is faster bandwidth. Now, why is that interesting? It's interesting because it changes what you can do with it. Way back in the day, you could do voice calls. Then you could do voice calls, SMS, and some very slow networking. SMS changed the way that people lived completely. So going from first generation to second generation dramatically changed, not just technology, but society. 5G has almost no latency when it's done properly. What can you do that is impacted by latency with 5G that you can't do with the other networks? And it's not about the connectivity. Forget about the connectivity. It's about the impact. What can you only do with it? IoT devices, connecting up millions of devices, and I mean millions. Amazing capability, but it's nothing to do with the connectivity. So how do we choose which of these things to do? Focus on outcomes. Customers doesn't mean people who buy stuff here, it means people who are using it. So if you're an internal service, your customers are people who use the things you're building. Focus on what they can do. So you need to put the customer at the center. Flip it around. So it's not about technology, it's about the customer. And make sure that you have digital models of people, things, and your business, because that is how you can start planning for it. So it's not about technology, it's about the users and what you do with them. These are some people we've worked with, and that's me and my sales buddy Kenneth. So come and have a tonics with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so into the last section. What questions have we got for Richard then? We've got a full house today, so I'm hoping... Here we go. Gentleman at the back.
Richard, hi. Great presentation.
Thank you.
My interest is, you talk a lot about these are happening out there.
Yes.
What have been the challenges around deploying some of these technologies in terms of how do you get it approved within a company to actually commit to doing some of this stuff?
That's a great question. And the difficulty is inertia, corporate inertia. People don't understand why they need to adopt stuff, typically. So what you have to do is what we call embed, but generally it's about internal marketing. So very often you can go to any kind of business and you'll find one person in that organization who is super excited about building whatever it happens to be. But getting it rolled out requires you to go through a sales process internally. And it's not about actually getting money from them, it's about marketing your services. So a very common thing that we see is people build a mobile app, and we're going to push it out to all of our staff, everybody's going to love this, and then nobody uses it. And the reason nobody uses it is it's not important, doesn't help them, may not be usable. So it's very much the same process to get the technology out there in terms of adoption. I'll come back to persuading people to move forwards. Is the same as selling any real product. You have to understand if there's actually a need for it. Does it meet the need? Is it easy to use? Da, 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 da. Now, getting people to start doing things It's very often that we all know the feeling. We've got a million other jobs to do. We've all got plates spinning. We've got legacy systems that are 20 years old that need to be updated, and we've got databases need to. You have to cut through all of that and say, it doesn't matter where you are today, you have to start planning for the future. And one of the things, and I had the APIs there, one of the things that's really important is building out API layers so that you can start being flexible. So somebody says, I can't do that because I'm running on top of a mainframe, for example. The answer is you can put a layer on top of that mainframe that allows us today to start building stuff outwards, and at some point in the future, we can swap out that back-end system, put in another one. So there's ways and means to get around it, but you just have to make sure that people understand that A, the imperative for what they're doing, and B, that it's actually part of an ongoing roadmap. It doesn't stop you doing what you're doing already. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Sure.
But
Brian,
it's not easy.
we'll just come to you in a second.
Oh, Brian first.
I was going to say Brian, and then this gentleman to follow.
Thanks. Just kind of picking up on that, but a slightly different angle. There's an old adage in the oil and gas industry about either being technology push or market pull. And just picking up on the last question about the deployment part of it, the deployment of new technologies from this organisation is highly dependent on our operator clients saying, well, here's an asset, come and try it here. It strikes me that an awful lot of what we've looked at this morning is very much technology push. Is that how you see it?
Some of it's technology push, but a lot of it is, funnily enough, things that have been around for a very long time that have suddenly become useful. So I'm going to take AI as an example. And the Gmail, so Gmail's been around for 10 years or something, and it's got AI in it now, but you don't notice it. So there's yes, if you make it explicit that you're adding, new magic ingredient X, then yes, people have to think about it. But a lot of the time you can start infusing it into the process. Now that's, again, it's not to say that people are going to instantly adopt it. It's not necessarily easy to get them to do it. But presenting it as something shiny and new will attract some people, but put off not a lot of others. But if you start rolling out the advantages and things suddenly start getting better. So I go back to the example of the big consultancies that saved 12,000 hours. If you can come back to people and say, yes, this is technology push, but if you use it, it's going to save you X thousand hours of labor or reduce safety incidents or whatever. Good business case, which again is as old as the problem it's trying to solve. So no, it's not easy. People are still very reluctant, but I do think that a lot of this stuff is actually not that new. You might be amused to know that deep neural networks, the things that power AI learning, were invented in 1942. So the expression, it takes a long time to be an overnight success. Well, a lot of this stuff is happening. I started building mobile apps in 2004 before anybody knew what they were. And again, it's an interesting thing that you see. If I stand back, you got the problem. If I stand back, the screen changes. If you stand forward, you get feedback. So it's very interesting to see how you balance that push and pull process to let people see that this is as normal. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah.
Super. Keith.
Keith Aldridge from Eigen. You'd mentioned in one of your slides that the world is run on Excel, and the oil and gas industry is as guilty as any. How do you think we change the mindset and move away and adopt some of these emerging technologies?
Well, just specifically looking at the Excel problem, which is serious. I mean, you do find major corporations actually run their entire operations on it. They don't think about it in those terms, but you find people with VBA macros that are driving all sorts of horrible stuff. So how do you solve that problem? Well, one of the interesting things is the move to file sharing, not necessarily in the cloud, but once you start to take the files away from people's individual devices, you can start looking at the content of them and going, oh, look, that's a spreadsheet. We should be doing something with that. So that you can start monitoring people's usage of those things. And there's companies like Cumulus and Dundee, for example, that have technologies that enable you to then take that data out of the spreadsheets and then connect them into a data lake or whatever terminology you want to use for it. But the sharing mentality is a cultural thing. And a lot of the technology, and to go back to you gentlemen's question as well, a lot of it's about culture. You have to fix a culture before you can introduce it. Introducing new ways of work are always inhibited by the cultural impact of it's scary, I don't know how to do it, or this is my data, or whatever. So you have to change the culture of this is my data, I manage it locally, and help people make that transition. One of the things that all technology deployments fail on is not educating people. It's assuming that people can just pick it up and use it and see the advantages of it, but a lot of the time they're not going to see it. So CFOs like to keep their data. In one of my previous jobs, I never actually got around to doing it, but the CFO didn't believe that the building was insecure, and we were holding customer data that was legally sensitive. So I almost went and stole his laptop one lunchtime. I worked out how to do it, I just never got around to doing it. So sometimes you have to do things like that to demonstrate it. So culture change, technology that picks up behind the scenes, pulls stuff forwards, and then thinking about getting the value, how do you extract the value from them?
Hi, Richard. My question was on the 5G connectivity. We've got to send, in our company, we've got to send a lot of data at times from offshore to onshore. Now, we've attempted to do that via cloud, and it takes forever to sync because the offshore Wi-Fi, etc., is very, very slow.
Yep.
Where do you see the future, and and how we'd get that into the deep North Sea of an asset? So.
Jet skis and USB sticks.
Because right now we sometimes have to send it back on a hard drive if the file's big enough. And
you've probably never heard of this thing, but it's called the Amazon Snowmobile. All right, have a look on the web. The Amazon Snowmobile is a huge container truck. And the truck, the body of the truck, the container, literally contains thousands of hard drives. So this is so that people moving from data center to cloud storage physically get this truck to pull up. They pull a fiber from the truck into the data center. They then upload the data off your existing disk storage system into the truck, which then drives back to Amazon and then squirts it back up into S3 or whatever. So they are literally doing the same thing to get stuff onto the cloud. Bandwidth is a huge problem. Now, 5G is never going to be going offshore. The problem is, with physics, the faster your Wi-Fi wireless gets, the shorter the distance it operates over. So if you have 5G versus 2.5G Wi-Fi in your house, you find that the 2.5G is slower, but is more reliable, and the 5G is much significantly faster, especially for things like video at short distances. So there isn't a convenient solution, unfortunately, and it is a big impediment for people moving to cloud. I mean, one of my favorite oil and gas stories was the person who was saying, you have to go and ask the ship's captain to move the ship so you can connect to the satellite. So data is a big problem, and not just the speed, but the cost, very high. So until you start pulling out fiber, you really are stuck with the ships of disks. So just an amusing incident about the Amazon Snowmobile. When they launched it, they were having one of their Amazon annual tech events, AWS event in Las Vegas, and Jeff Bezos is standing presenting downstage, and the truck drives on stage behind him. It's that difficult to get data on and off. In one of my previous roles, the same one where I was going to steal the laptop, we were looking at moving our data center's own storage array online. I worked out that with the bandwidth we had available to us, it was going to take 120 years. And it would have cost a lot of money as well over those 120 years. So it's a big problem. So the solution, I would say, is something that SAP are certainly looking at, which is your on-ship, on-rig, on-structure data center, where what you do is you use a lot of smart filtering stuff to identify what's important. So you only ship back what's important. So you move the processing out to the edge. And funnily enough, in the Gartner top 10 that Daniel was referring to earlier, they talk about edge computing. And the edge computing means move it to where the data is because you can't afford to move the data in. A lot of the data is going to be predictable, or a lot of the data is going to be saying it's fine, and then occasionally you get something that's an exception. I don't know what data you're handling, but SAP did a lot of stuff around, as I say, moving the processing onto the rig so that you could make the decisions about drilling on the rig based on that. Again, not being an oil and gas expert, apologies for terminology and whatever.
Super, thank you. And gentleman here.
Thank you. It's just a question about security.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're exposing a lot of information on the web. Many experts out there would like their hands on even for a laugh, not necessarily stealing information. So have you thought about that, again, for example, for a small company who has the old traditional system set up and they're looking into moving to this applications, and, you know, obviously we can see there's a lot of benefit in running it this way, but how do you protect your data?
Move it into the cloud.
Move it to the cloud.
Move it to the cloud, yes. Okay, I'll ask you a question. How many security people work for Amazon? Lots. How many security people work for you? None. Therefore, is it more secure in your device, or is it more secure in AWS or Azure or wherever?
I can answer this question. At the moment, we don't connect to the internet devices that they have sensible information. So
that's the only way to be secure.
That's the only way to do it.
So they could probably break into your office and steal it.
Yeah, but are you thinking more like I heard earlier on you said that you don't have to share all the data. There are clever ways
you
to
filter
avoid
it out.
that. So obviously there is thoughtful solutions around that. So you can still share the information by having some protection, you know?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, one of the key things is if you have any network whatsoever, and if you're of the slightest bit of interest, somebody is looking at your network. If you have, anybody here has launched a service and then looked at, you put up a new website, you will find that you are being hammered by people trying to break in, just for fun, most of them. But anybody serious will already be on your network. All of the major oil and gas companies will have people sitting on the network looking at what you're doing. They may be malicious, they may not be malicious, but they will be in there. There's nothing you can do about it. So what you have to do is use some of the very smart technologies that are out there that spot inappropriate behaviors on the network. So somebody's PC that suddenly starts downloading large amounts of stuff off this server that it's never done before. There's a company in Edinburgh and Glasgow called Sumerian that does a lot of this kind of technology. A couple of others as well, so that they are using smarts and patterns. So why is this server suddenly getting hit by all of this traffic? Why is that person looking at this website? There's all sorts of funny stories about people with things like webcams that are suddenly being used as spam relays and looking for the traffic. Why does this network segment have 5 gigabytes of stuff flowing over it, whereas last week it only had 1 megabyte? That's how modern security works. It uses AI to spot the patterns so that you can come back and shut it down because you can't prevent it. So you have to be able to detect and control it. So yes, ultimately, physically locking your disk in a safe and not connecting your devices to networks is the only way to be secure. This is what the military do, by the way. The military stuff is all take the disks out of your computer, lock them up in a big safe at the end of the day, and even when if you're really paranoid about data security, you don't have it near telephones or fax machines, if you remember them. So the military have these metal caravan-like structures that they put inside their offices, Faraday cages, where they operate on really sensitive data. So it's a big problem. Security is a huge problem. It's very costly. I have come across some people who say, don't bother with security, invest in insurance instead. Quite seriously, because it's cheaper to get the risk insurance than it is to protect your systems.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Thank you. So I think we've got time for one more question. Does anybody have a final question? Unless there's
That's
anyone
okay.
else, just because you've had one already. Okay.
Sorry. So we've just recently moved on to a cloud-based solution, and the old server that we were working off of was great from a point of view that if I had a document open and then the other guy at the other side of the room tried to open that same document, it would tell him someone else is in that document, you can only access it read-only. But then when we moved into the cloud, we have the consistent problem where people are opening up documents, forgetting to shut them down. The guy at the other side of the room is opening up, he's not got the most saved version because it's working through the cloud and it doesn't tell them.
That depends how it's set up. You should be able to do locking across the cloud. It depends on what you're using. The alternative would be to go the other direction, use something like Google Docs where everybody can connect the same document at the same time and work on it simultaneously. So you should be able to put locks in place, because that behavior shouldn't go away. That's what those little tilde files are often used for as well, and you think .dat files that fly around. But yes, it takes a long time for technology to catch up with these kind of fundamental changes.
Okay, thank you. So just before we finish up, Steve, have you got any sort of questions or queries for Richard? Or indeed for the rest of the room?
No, I've got quite a few comments around security. So if anyone comes through, we're working on it. And yes, you are not secure. So the cloud is far more secure than your own premises. Just, you know.
Yeah.
My question is a bit mentioned. Do you see any of these converging together? In other words, the fact that you got these things working together would mean that there's even more of a transition and more of a transformation.
Yeah, definitely. So data, AI, connectivity go together very naturally. And they also enable cloud. You'll notice actually cloud, it's interesting talking about cloud, because cloud was one of the emerging technologies that has now moved up into the plateau of productivity, to use the hype cycle term. So generally speaking, all of these work together. There isn't anything that I would pull out. So personalization, a lot of that's done with AI, for example. A lot of it's driven by data. The more data you have, the smarter you can make your systems. So convergence is happening. But again, I'm going to pick up another point that I said earlier. I'm just going to say it again. Is there are so many tools out there that enable you to do incredible things with software that that's not the limiting factor anymore. It is things like bandwidth. It's things like, what do I want to do? How do I do this? It's not how do I build it, it's what is it that I need to achieve, which is why I go back to this business outcome thing. So that as technologists, we need to move from thinking about technology solutions through to business outcomes. And as business people, we need to lose the fear of technology, because a lot of the time people are still very frightened of it. So, yes, it's all coming together.
So I think that's a finish. So I just want to add then, so our role here at the Oil and Gas Technology Centre is to invest in new technology, or technology that's tried and tested but needs to be worked into the way we work today. And that's why we have business outcome themes largely, because you can apply any technology to those themes. So in quite a lot of the areas that have been discussed in both presentations today, if you're at both, we're interested in partnering with both operators, tier one companies, and technology providers to test some of these things out in the real world. But I think a big thank you to Richard.
Thank you.
And